welcome to the Rockin' the Journey podcast. Our podcast is all about inspiring, empowering and encouraging women to live their best possible life, whatever their age. Now, Erica and I are really keen to showcase women who we think are inspirational, really at the top of their game, but also making sure that these women are doing things for other women as well. So my guest today is a fabulous woman. She's been recommended to me on a number of occasions, actually, to talk on this podcast. Her name's Deanne Weir, and she is all the way from Australia. Hi, Deanne.
Hello, Debbie. Great to connect with you.
It's evening out there, isn't it? We're morning here in the UK.
Evening, middle of winter, but it's been a pretty good day so far.
So Deanne, I'm going to leave it to you to tell us who you are. I know you were a former lawyer, you're a businesswoman, you're a TV producer, and you're a philanthropist. So tell us how it all began.
Well, I guess without making it too long a story, I was very blessed to grow up in a beautiful family in a small country town in regional Victoria, in Australia, and just a country town where everything was about sport, was about community. I was the first in my family to go to university, and I applied for the National Academy of Dramatic Arts here, and they rejected me, so I became a lawyer instead. But I'm someone who's always loved film and storytelling, and so I guess business-wise, I became a lawyer and worked in television, in sort of the pay TV television industry here in Australia, and I was very, very lucky that the company that I worked for was a listed company, and we had private equity come in. All of the senior team co-invested with that private equity firm. And when they left, they had a successful exit, and that was also then a successful exit for us. So that allowed me to sort of create a capital base. And with that capital base, I've since, for about the last 10 years, I've been investing in technology companies, in media-related companies, and more sort of recently into feature films. And then we've also set up a philanthropic arm of what we do. And all of our philanthropy is very much focused through a gender lens. I think, my core belief is that if we can achieve much greater gender equality across the world, that the world will be, this will allow us to actually, as a community, reach our real potential, because, we can't be the best sort of society that we could be if we're not allowing 50% of people to actually achieve their full potential. So I'm a passionate advocate for gender equality, and I try and sort of make sure that that's part of the values set that I bring to whether it's my business investments or my screen investments or the philanthropy that we engage in.
Deanne, it's so interesting. A couple of things I want to pick up on there. But firstly, a number of our guests talk, obviously we're a women's only platform and we want to promote the female agenda, but more and more we're getting women and men talking to us kind of a bit of an eye roll to say, look, listen, the gender things are done, we're getting senior women on boards now, we're getting more international leaders as women, really, are we making too much of this?
Here in Australia, we're in the middle of a national crisis of violence against women. One woman every week is murdered in Australia, either by a current or previous intimate partner. There is a deep-seated misogyny that still exists within this environment, and still attitudes that essentially try to say that women should be locked into some part of society rather than being able to actually express, the full breadth of who they are and what they want to be. And that's as restricting for men as it is for women. So just, yes, I'm a member of Chief Executive Women. I chair an ASX listed board. Just because I'm personally been able to achieve those things, and a lot of my friends done the same, that does not mean that we have achieved gender equality in this country or indeed across the Western world and beyond that. we still have a lot of challenges. And a lot of that is because we're actually sort of existing in a bunch of institutions that are very much have been created in the image of men.
Yeah.
And so then we as women are being told that we need to adjust ourselves to fit the mold of those institutions that have been designed by and for men. And, you know, we're the other, we're something else, and we've got to actually change ourselves to fit into that mold. Whereas I say, I think that's completely wrong. What we need to do is evolve those institutions to be much more open and welcoming to everyone across society, whether it's women, whether it's men, whether it's people of different races, different cultures, because that's actually who our society is. So we should be trying to open up our institutions to welcome people to the table.
So Deanne, I want to pick back, because something that absolutely fascinates me is I'm a mother of daughters and now a grandmother of a daughter, that how we bring girls up, because I think those messages are so important. And one theme that we've had from all our inspirational women is that they have had a very good first start, a very often a very good father. So can you tell me a little bit more about your background? What were the messages that got you to believe in yourself and that you could kind of go to the top?
Well, you know, I mean, I had a beautiful childhood with a beautiful family, but this growing up, I like to say, growing up in Horsham in Victoria in the 70s, if that didn't make you a feminist, nothing would, because it was actually a very sort of a patriarchal environment, if you like. I was so blessed that, you know, I had a very strong mother and I had a beautiful, beautiful dad who just recently passed away, actually. And he was just so loving and supportive, and just wanted me to do whatever it was that I wanted to do. And I was then very lucky that when I was at school, my local high school, I ended up with a bunch of girls who were my friends who were still, you know, now in our 50s. We still try and get together once a year and catch up. And those girls were all the daughters of professionals, and it was just assumed that they would go to university. Whereas for me, that wasn't quite the assumption, but I was sort of able to go along with them. And I had some fabulously inspiring teachers. And funnily enough, one of whom, you know, has kind of been a lifelong friend. I think we were like 15 or so, and we were her first teaching gig. So she was only 21 or whatever. We became friends and she's become an author, and I've actually just optioned her first book to turn into a film, which is sort of you know, a lovely continuation of that friendship. But it was very much, I think, a case of me feeling very early on that this gender inequality that I was seeing, I didn't think was the right thing. And I guess I railed against that a bit, and I found support in that through, you know, other women in the town and friends from school. And then sort of at university and beyond, I became involved in feminist politics. I learned all about organising and lobbying and how you can create change and societal change through a group here in Australia called the Women's Electoral Lobby. And I was very actively involved in that until I sort of then got, you know, into the middle of my corporate career. And I sort of lost a bit of focus on that. So it's been such a joy to now, some years on, come back to that sort of that feminist world and a focus on gender equality, and being able to do it through the not-for-profits I'm involved in and through our storytelling and our investing.
Great. So we're going to talk about the storytelling and the investing in a minute, but I just want to go back to a woman. So you would have been in your career, if I'm right, in the kind of late 80s, early 90s. You started your career then, and obviously role models, which is something else that comes across so much, that if you can't see it, how can you be it? So that the importance of those role models, which is part of the reason we showcase women like yourself. But so in that time, how did you get ahead? I mean, I really love what you're saying about that institutions often want women to fit in, to become the kind of shouty, difficult, maybe, trying to choose my words carefully, but very much in a male kind of a traditional kind of masculine idea of what a leader should be. So how did you keep your authenticity and your own kind of values by trying? I mean, I don't know the Australian system, only what I see from the outside, but the outside is there is quite a macho culture. And how do you fit in as a woman? Like, more so than men, probably, but how did you fit in?
You know what? I think actually, I think part of it was a little bit of ignorance, in the sense of, because I didn't know any lawyers before I went to law school and became a lawyer. So I sort of, it was like I didn't really know that much about what to expect. And I just sort of jumped in and said, wow, this looks great. And I didn't really bring a lot of expectations into that as to how I should behave, or how I mean, I just thought I was being paid to do a job. I should roll up my sleeves, get into it and get it done, right? I wasn't sort of so focused on what the different expectations were. So I just jumped into everything. I was very lucky, I think, early on in my legal career in particular, that I had a couple of bosses, both male actually, who were just fabulous, who I think appreciated my enthusiasm and just, you know, opened doors for me, and gave me opportunities and said, do you think you can do this? And I've gone, sure, why not? And they let me do it. And off I went. And so I had, I think, some quite good luck. But I think that the other thing that at the time, and I do certainly attribute a lot of this to the leadership of the women that I met through the Women's Electoral Lobby. And that was, I think, I really realised early on that there's a big difference between a woman leader and a feminist leader, and that it doesn't, to my mind, there's no point just swapping out, pulling one man away from a table and putting a woman there instead. What we have to do is try and change the table as we go, and change the system, and open things up. And, you know, I'm I've never experienced significant sexual harassment or any, you know, really poor behavior in that way. But just because I didn't doesn't mean that I don't know other women who did. So I've always seen it as, if I'm sort of able to get to those tables, then my job is to try and change them as I go. So in that way, I aspire to be a feminist leader, not just a woman leader. And you know, there are men, I've been very lucky to work with some men who I would categorize as feminist leaders. In fact, my CEO in the television company that I worked in, that you know, was the sort of the source of our capital, wonderful man, John Porter, who's now in Belgium, but running a company called Telenet. But John was someone who always believed in wanting to have 50-50 male and females at his leadership table, of trying to make sure everyone was heard, had a conversation. And, you know, when you sort of unpacked a bit with John as to what his story was, and he was like, well, I grew up surrounded by women, and in fact his mother, he's American, and his mother's roommate at college was Gloria Steinem.
Oh wow.
And so
of course he would.
Yeah, so there was this absolutely a through line that you could see from him to us, but I do think that difference in that there is a difference between just having women at the table, or having women who want to then try and change the system, and that's what I think is sort of my obligation.
It's strange you mentioned Gloria Steinem. It's so, sometimes I just feel, you know, that was 70s, that was 70s, right? And we're now 2021. Have we made a lot of progress, or is it, as one of our previous guests, very eminent lawyer, said, that it's become more insidious, actually, that actually, whereas sexism and women finding life difficult was out in the open back then, now it is a more kind of insidious sexism that just stops women influencing. What would you say about that?
Look, we had in day before International Women's Day here, on International Women's Day here, 100,000 women in Australia took to the streets in marches because of a whole range of things that there were. It's a bit of a long and complicated story, but we've our Australian of the Year this year was an incredible young woman called Grace Tame, who was a survivor of sexual abuse as a child. Yeah. And she's so articulate and so strong in what she said. Her coming out and speaking publicly inspired then a woman who worked at Parliament House, was a parliamentary staffer who was raped in Parliament House in Australia, who she then came out inspired by Grace and told her story and telling her truth. And the way in which her story was handled by the powers that be, from the Prime Minister on down, was so appalling. Yeah. That it has put women to the streets, and I swear that a lot of the signs that women were carrying, and there was all generations, and but a whole lot of women in their 70s walking around with signs saying, "I can't believe we're still having this conversation," and yeah. It's incredible. And you're right though, Debbie, it is insidious. Because the eye rolling that you were mentioning earlier on, of where people say, "Oh, come on, the gender thing's done. We've got gender equality. We've got, Britain's had a female prime minister. Australia's had a female prime minister. Come on." And it's like, no, that's not the only answer. And we need to keep having this conversation until our daughters and our sons and our non-binary children are all able to be who they want to be without being forced into boxes because of their gender.
Yeah. Now I want to talk about older women, and that's and absolutely recognise there's so many issues about women, aren't there? But our platform is for women 45 plus, and the one thing we've heard a lot of is that women hit about 50, and they often have this kind of dip in confidence, whether it's how they're perceived or how they feel about themselves, the menopause, all these things. And one thing that, interestingly, it didn't happen to me because I had a lot of loss around that time. And it really focused my mind of, actually, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to do what I think is important and what my values are. But a number of women have spoken to us about this loss of confidence. So why do you think this happens, and what can we do about it? Because to us, this feels like a huge loss of potential, even if it's women like us coming out and kind of beating the drum and using our platforms to push the gender agenda. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think this happens, and there absolutely is a change in the way some people in society view women when they sort of get 50 plus, because if all you see is your perception of women as essentially being sexual beings, and once they get a certain age, you don't think that they're as interesting in that way anymore, that they do become invisible. And I've just invested in a film that called How to Please a Woman, that is essentially which is sort of a dramedy, but a comedy and a drama, and it explores this very issue, right? And it is true. I see it as a superpower. I think that anyone who only wants to view me or my sisters through that lens, I think that's your problem, because we have so much more to offer. I now take it as a superpower to say, my superpower turning, when I turn 50 is kind of, I don't care anymore. I mean, I still dress up, I still, try and keep myself, presentable for me, but I don't I am so much more than the sum of, my boobs and the hairstyle. I am, you know, and I think that this is what is so insidious about the way that we represent women on screen, the way that we talk about women, when we constantly focus on their clothes, on their style. Even politicians, you know, we talk about Angela Merkel, one of the most successful politicians of the last 30 years around the world, and people still comment on the fact of the way that she dresses, and you go, you people are insane. Like, look at what she's done as a politician. You know, so I think, and I'm not in any way meaning to diminish an individual woman's experience of that, of how she feels in that way, but I think that's the point at which we have to remind ourselves that having reached 50 or 55 or whatever it is, your accumulated wisdom and lived experience is so valuable to people around you, and indeed to yourself, that, you know, I feel empowered by that accumulated knowledge and experience, that I'm going to kind of use it and share it with other people, because I think that there's a lot to share. And I think what we do about it is to do more and more. You know, I was hearing the other day a great program that the national broadcaster here implemented after the BBC had done it, which was a 50-50 pledge, to make sure that the BBC was, when they were interviewing people, BBC News was interviewing people, they pledged to ensure they were achieving 50% would be women, right?
Yeah.
And this is so important, because we have to see women as voices of authority, and we have to see women as relevant, whatever their age. And that is, you know, I mean, I think we have a bit of a general ageism thing, except a lot of men men become old and they're wise. You know, women become old and they're outdated. Well, you know, I think we are making a lot of progress on that. But I think it's not about fixing older women. It's actually about ensuring that we listen differently.
Yeah. So it's interesting. There's a new channel on in the UK, and it's a kind of real disruptor in the TV.
GB News.
Yeah, GB News, which is. But I looked on and I thought, this is fantastic. Really diverse group of people, but no older women. There were some older guys, and there was some Asian women, some Black women, but no older women. So I'm about to write to Andrew Neil to point that out. But
excellent. Well, in fact, a friend, that's actually run by an Australian guy, Angelo Frankopoulos, and I will email him for you as well. You go to Andrew, and I'll go to Angelo.
It's such an interesting new channel, whatever your politics are.
Yeah.
Okay, so just about staying with this older agenda. So vulnerability, something that has come up a number of times, and something our community really, I always get messages about this when we have a very senior person talking about vulnerability. We had a very senior politician, Jackie Smith, on saying that it was really important for her to keep her vulnerability, because she had such terrible media attention. She risked closing everything down, and she said if she closed her vulnerability down, she closed her soul and her heart down. And Brene Brown's work on this is so powerful, but I think a lot of women are confused by this. I mean, how do you really, the world of work is very hard, and if you want to change, it's even harder. How do you do vulnerability well?
Well, I think the people telling us not to be vulnerable are the same people who are trying to put us into that box of saying, this is how things have been done in a world designed by men for men, and men are being told that, you know, they must have this stoic sort of thing, and therefore women, if they want to succeed, have to not show vulnerability to be more like men. Well, absolute rubbish. I mean, it's this not expressing vulnerability, not allowing people to be vulnerable, this is the source of mental health issues, of aggression, of poor judgment and bad decision making. So actually allowing, whether you're a woman or a man, to express your vulnerability, to express doubt, to think through things, to admit you're wrong. I mean, my gosh, some of the political issues that we face is because we've evolved into this world, and I think social media is a bit of a used as a weapon in this sense, that everything's caught on camera, and no one's allowed to say, actually, I've changed my mind on that. I was actually wrong, right? Because someone, 5 years ago, you said this, and it's like, well, you know what? I know now. I know a lot more now than I knew 5 years ago, and therefore I've changed my views. So I think it's actually really important to embrace that. And I think a lot of men would be much happier, and older men would be much happier if they could embrace that level of vulnerability and change. Because it's not, that being stoic is one thing, exuding confidence is one thing, but to take that to such an extreme that you can't allow yourself to express doubt, fear, concern, I think it diminishes who we are as people, and it's not helpful to anybody.
Yeah. Now, you spend a lot of your time now as a philanthropist. As you say, you've got yourself into that position to be able to invest in things you care about. So what does the future look like for you now? What are your hopes and dreams from where you're sitting now?
I turned 55 the other day, and so I'm planning the next 20 years of my career. Yeah. And a big focus of that is actually going to be on producing films. And storytelling generally, just because I think stories are the most effective way that we have to create empathy and to share experience, and video, whether it's film or television or YouTube or whatever. I mean, it's the most pervasive cultural force of our time. And if we are not storytelling through the form of video or film in a way that makes sure we represent all of our stories and diversity of our stories, and that means representing women in all of their glory, then I think that we're not going to continue to evolve in the way that I believe we should. So I want to spend a lot more of my time sort of investing in developing and supporting storytelling that is about female storytellers telling stories, diverse stories of women. I'm still investing in technology companies, and I chair two technology companies, one more developed and one that's more of a startup. I love working with smart people who've got great ideas that they sort of want to share with the world. And then I sort of have I chair a few not-for-profits as well. And what's kind of interesting is the more that I've done this, the less there is a distinction between what's sort of a money-making venture versus what's a social profit venture, because I think as we look forward, making financial return is one thing, but it can't be the only part of an equation, because what's the point of making money and investing something that's going to have a negative impact on the planet or a negative impact on social cohesion? I'm sort of looking at a broader range of sort of performance elements, if you like, in terms of what's important to me. And I'm just, I don't know, I feel more energized than I have in years. And I'm just there's some incredible people out there that I've got the chance to work with. And I'm just excited about doing what I can to support them. I think maybe one of the things I find as I'm getting older is that you can be more things to more people. It's doesn't have to be all about you. Because you had a lot of that. Yeah, no, it's good, and it's just kind of going, wow, you're interesting, you're doing something cool. If I've got something that I can do to help you, then I'll do what I can, because that sounds fun. And it's so good not to be in a corporate environment doing these things, kind of, running my own show, deciding where I want to allocate my time. That is such a privilege, and I want to make sure I make the most of that.
I think it's great you say at 55 you've got 20 more years of work, and I think that's such a fantastic, and there's so many role models older than us now that are out there still kind of working and really contributing. It's such a fantastic message. So a couple of quick fire questions just to end. Who are your role models?
Oh, wow. Well, there's Julia Gillard, who was a Prime Minister of Australia, and who was our first female Prime Minister, and who was had a pretty rough time with the media and so on with some of those issues, who now post-politics has gone out and is living in the UK, leading all about women's leadership and how we sort of change the world. She's incredibly inspiring to me. Range of other women I work with here, some men, someone like John, who I mentioned earlier, who was my CEO. He's someone who is a man who is a true feminist leader, and I think that's really inspiring. My family, I'm blessed to have 2 fabulous brothers and a sister who they inspire me every day, and I'm lucky I've got a very nice bloke, very nice husband who looks after me very well.
That's always good to mention, isn't it? And your biggest regret? I put you on the spot here a bit.
Oh, none. I don't know. It's pointless. It's pointless regretting. I think I've learned lessons and reflected on things that I might have done differently. I guess that I didn't get into NIDA, to the National Dramatic. Maybe that's my biggest regret, that I ended up not having a life on the stage. But I will compensate for that by doing what I can to help others.
And what would you most like to be remembered for?
Oh, being someone who did what I could to support other people to be the best that they can be. I mean, that's, I guess someone who woke up hopefully every day to say, what can we all do to make the world a better place today? That's what gets me out of bed, and I would hope someone might remember me for that.
Deanne Weir, thank you so much for your time. It's been so great talking to you. Such an inspirational story, and I'm sure really encouraging for our community out there. So thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Lovely to chat.